Get away from her, right now. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to step back before I call the police." The words cut across the lobby of the Alderton Arms like a blade through still water. The woman who said them was named Patricia Holt. She was the building's property manager, had been for 11 years, and she spoke with the particular authority of someone who had never once been told she was wrong. She stood near the elevator bank, arms folded, chin lifted, eyes fixed on the boy with the kind of certainty that required no evidence. The boy was 17 years old. His name was Marcus Webb. He was lean and dark-skinned, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood down, standing at the base of the stairwell with his hands visible, his shoulders square, not moving. The lobby of the Alderton Arms had a marble floor that held sound the way a cathedral does. Every word Patricia Holt spoke bounced off it and reached the 7 or 8 residents who had stopped moving the moment she raised her voice. A woman near the mailboxes held her key mid-turn. A man in a suit pressed the elevator button and then did not move toward it. A teenager in a school uniform looked at her phone and put it away. Nobody spoke. Nobody stepped forward. Patricia Holt pointed at Marcus again. "I said, step back. Step away from that woman this instant." What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was who Marcus Webb was and what he had already done, and who it was that he had done it for. Stay with this one to the end. Every detail is here for a reason. When the truth came out, it changed things in that building that had never been changed before. But before we get there, let me take you back to the beginning. Now, here's what most people didn't know about Marcus Webb. He was 17 years old and he lived in apartment 4C of the Alderton Arms with his mother, Denise Webb, who worked the early shift at a hospital laundry facility 6 days a week. The Alderton Arms sat on the corner of Decatur and 9th, in a part of the city that real estate listings had recently started calling emerging, a word that meant the buildings were old but the rents were climbing. The lobby smelled of floor wax and old radiator heat, and the elevator had been out of service for 11 days. 11 days. The building management had posted a notice on the 3rd day, a small white card taped to the elevator door that read, "Under repair. We apologize for the inconvenience." And that card had yellowed at the corners while nothing else changed. Marcus had been navigating those stairs twice a day since the elevator went down. He did not complain. Complaining was not something his grandmother had taught him to do. Her name was Estelle Webb, and she had raised him for the first 8 years of his life in a 2-room house in rural Georgia, while his mother worked and saved and built the life that eventually brought them both north. Estelle Webb was a small woman who kept a garden larger than her house and who spoke slowly and meant every word. She had told Marcus, when he was 6 years old and furious about something he could no longer remember, to sit beside her on the porch steps and listen. "Boy," she had said, pressing one dry hand against his, "the ones who make the most noise are the ones who have the least to show. You stay low. You build high. And when the time comes, the work speaks for itself." He had never forgotten it. He moved in silence. He built in silence. At school, he was not the loudest student in any room, but he was the one the teachers called on when the answer mattered. He had a 3.9 grade point average that he had told almost no one about. He had been accepted into a summer engineering program at the state university, a program that accepted 12 students from across the region, and he had told his mother and no one else. He carried that acceptance letter in the front pocket of his backpack, folded in thirds the way his grandmother had taught him to keep important things, close to the body, out of sight, ready when needed. He was not the kind of boy who needed to be seen. What he was, on the morning that Patricia Holt raised her voice at him in the lobby, was tired. He had been up since 5:30, had carried 2 bags of groceries up 12 flights of stairs for Mrs. Cecilia Fontaine in apartment 12B, and was on his way back down when Patricia Holt appeared. That is the detail the lobby did not know. That is the detail that changes everything. Now, let me tell you about the woman who ran the Alderton Arms. Patricia Holt had come to the building 11 years ago as an assistant property manager and had worked her way up by attrition, persistence, and a talent for making herself indispensable to the building's ownership group, a real estate holding company called Meridian Property Partners. She knew the lease agreements better than most lawyers. She knew which tenants paid late, which ones had complained, which ones had been quietly moved along. She had a filing system that was color-coded and laminated, kept in a cabinet behind her desk with a lock only she had a key to. She was, by any reasonable measure, competent. That was not the problem. The problem was the lens through which she read the lobby every morning. She had a category in her mind for who belonged in this building, and that category had edges she had never examined and never been asked to examine. When she saw a young black man in a gray hoodie standing near an elderly white woman at the base of the stairwell, she did not see a boy who had just carried groceries up 12 flights. She did not ask what had happened before she arrived. She reached for the conclusion she had always reached, and she reached for it fast, and she said it out loud in a marble lobby in front of 8 witnesses. That was the error, not a small one. She had no idea what she had just set in motion. The elderly woman at the base of the stairwell was named Cecilia Fontaine. She was 81 years old and had lived in apartment 12B of the Alderton Arms for 22 years. She was a compact woman with silver hair pinned back and hands that had once been strong and were now merely careful. She had a heart condition her cardiologist monitored every 3 months. She had a daughter in Phoenix who called on Sundays and a grandson she spoke of with a warmth that was almost reverence, the way people speak about something they are proud of but do not need to prove. When the elevator went down 11 days ago, Cecilia Fontaine had not left her apartment. She had groceries delivered. She had managed. But on this morning she had a medical appointment she could not reschedule, and she had made it down 11 flights before her knees gave out on the landing between the first and second floors. That was where Marcus found her, coming down from 12B with the empty grocery bags folded under his arm. He had found Mrs. Fontaine sitting on the concrete step with her hand pressed against the wall and her breath coming in careful, measured intervals. He had not hesitated. He set the bags down. He asked her, quietly, if she could put her arm around his shoulders. She looked at him for a moment. This boy she had seen in the hallway a dozen times, this boy who always held the door. And she said yes. And Marcus Webb had carried Cecilia Fontaine down the remaining flight and a half to the lobby, one careful step at a time, her weight against his side, his hand steady at her back. 12 flights down, not up. He had already brought her groceries up. He had been standing with her at the base of the stairwell, making sure she was steady, when Patricia Holt walked in from the management office and saw what she decided she saw. The lobby went still. Patricia Holt's voice had a carrying quality she had trained over 11 years, and it reached every corner of that marble room. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said, moving toward Marcus with her phone already in her hand. "But this woman is a resident of this building, and you're going to step away from her right now, or I am calling the police." Marcus did not move. He did not raise his voice. His hands stayed where they were, one at Mrs. Fontaine's elbow, steadying her. Mrs. Fontaine turned toward Patricia Holt. "Patricia," she said, her voice quiet and very clear, "this young man just carried me down the stairs." Patricia Holt stopped walking. Something shifted in her expression. Not softening, but brief flicker of uncertainty she covered quickly. "Mrs. Fontaine, are you all right? Did he—" "I am fine," Mrs. Fontaine said, "because of him." The lobby did not move. The woman near the mailboxes had stopped pretending to sort her letters. The man in the suit had turned fully around. The teenager had not picked up her phone again. Patricia Holt looked at Marcus. He looked back at her. He said nothing. She said it was still a concern. She said she would need to document the incident. She said residents were not to receive assistance from non-authorized personnel and that building policy was very clear on that point. She said all of this in a voice slightly lower now, but no less certain, while Marcus Webb stood there with his hands visible and his face composed and his grandmother's voice somewhere in the back of his mind, patient and steady. Stay low. Build high. He had said 6 words total. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved toward Patricia Holt or away from her. He had simply stayed where he was, next to an 81-year-old woman who needed someone to stay. And it was about to get worse. Patricia Holt did not call the police. She called the front desk and asked Raymond Okafor, the building's daytime concierge, a man who had worked the Alderton Arms for 6 years and who had watched the whole thing from behind the desk without speaking, to come and document the situation. Raymond Okafor was a quiet man with a careful face who had learned in 6 years at that desk how to keep his expression neutral. He came around with a clipboard and a pen and wrote down what Patricia Holt told him to write. And while he was writing, he glanced once at Marcus, and Marcus saw in that glance something he recognized. The look of a man who knew better and was choosing, for now, to say nothing. Raymond Okafor was not the kind of man who made noise. But he was paying attention. Patricia Holt told Marcus he would need to provide his name and apartment number for the incident report. Marcus gave them. She asked if he was a resident. He said yes. She looked at him the way people look at something they are not sure they believe, and then she wrote it down. Mrs. Fontaine had been helped to a chair near the lobby door by this point. She sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes on Patricia Holt, and there was something in her expression that was not anger. It was older than anger and quieter, and it had the quality of a decision being made. She asked Patricia, in the same clear voice, to call her a car. Patricia said she would arrange a building car service. Mrs. Fontaine said she preferred to wait for her own car. Patricia said of course, and went back toward her office, and the lobby slowly began to breathe again. Marcus picked up the folded grocery bags and walked toward the stairwell door. He had 4 flights to climb back to 4C. He had school in 40 minutes. He did not look back. What nobody in that lobby knew, what Patricia Holt, with her color-coded files and her 11 years of certainty, had absolutely no idea about, was who Cecilia Fontaine had called the night before. Not her daughter in Phoenix, not her cardiologist. She had called her grandson. She had told him about the elevator. He had not liked the sound of her voice, and he had already been on his way. The car that arrived for Cecilia Fontaine 40 minutes later was not a car. It was 3 cars, black, identical, moving in a line with the particular unhurried precision of vehicles that do not need to hurry because the road adjusts to them. They pulled to the curb in front of the Alderton Arms, and the lobby windows gave everyone inside a clear view. Raymond Okafor looked up from the front desk. Patricia Holt came out of her office. The driver of the first car opened the rear door, and the man who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit without a tie, moving with the ease that belongs to people who have been powerful long enough that it has become unremarkable. He was perhaps 40 years old. He went directly to his grandmother without looking at the building, without any of the performance that people use when they want to be noticed. He simply went to her. His name was not on any lease. It was not on any document in Patricia Holt's color-coded cabinet, but it was on the deed to this building. It was on the deed to 4 other buildings in this city. It was on the founding documents of the Meridian Property Partners Holding Company, the company that owned the Alderton Arms, the company that signed Patricia Holt's paychecks, the company that had been sending her performance reviews for 11 years. His name was Darnell Fontaine. And he had absolutely no idea yet what had happened in this lobby that morning. But Raymond Okafor did. Raymond Okafor had written something on the bottom of his own copy of the incident report, not the one Patricia had filed, but the one he kept. He had written it in small, careful letters, the way a man writes something he knows he may need later. He had written the time. He had written what he saw. He had written Marcus Webb's name and apartment 4C, and the words carried her down from 12B. He had folded that paper and put it in his jacket pocket. When Darnell Fontaine walked through the door of the Alderton Arms for the first time in 4 months, Raymond Okafor did not hesitate. He came around the desk and said, "Mr. Fontaine, there's something you need to know about this morning." Darnell Fontaine listened. That was the first thing Raymond noticed. The man did not interrupt, did not reach for his phone, did not look past him toward his grandmother the way powerful people sometimes do when they have already decided what the information is worth. He stood in the lobby with his hands at his sides and his face very still, and he listened to every word. Raymond spoke quietly, because he had spent 6 years learning to speak quietly in this lobby, and he told it in order. The stairwell, the grocery bags, the careful steps down, Mrs. Fontaine's hand against the wall. He told it the way he had written it, with the time, with the details, with Marcus Webb's name and apartment number. When Raymond finished, Darnell Fontaine said 4 words. "Where is she now?" Not a question, a direction. Raymond pointed toward the chair by the lobby door, and Darnell Fontaine crossed the marble floor and crouched beside his grandmother the way a man crouches when he is not performing concern, but feeling it. He took her hands in both of his and said nothing for a long moment. She patted the back of his hand twice. That was all. Patricia Holt was standing at the edge of the lobby near her office door. She had recognized the cars. She was good at recognizing things. Cars, lease violations, building policy, and she had recognized that configuration exactly once before, 14 months ago, when the ownership group had sent a representative to walk the building's common areas. She had assumed the representative was a liaison. She had given him a tour. She had shown him the filing cabinet. She had not known his name. She knew it now. The color had left the upper part of her face and settled somewhere below her jaw. She stood very still, and that stillness had a different quality than Marcus Webb's stillness. His had been composure. Hers was the stillness of a person who has just understood, all at once, the full dimensions of a room they thought they knew. Darnell Fontaine rose from beside his grandmother. He turned and looked at the lobby. Not at Patricia Holt specifically, not yet, but at the lobby as a whole. The way a man looks at something he owns and has not examined carefully enough. The marble floor. The yellowed card taped to the elevator door. The small white rectangle that read, "Under repair. We apologize for the inconvenience." Its corners curled and brown. He walked to it. He peeled it off the door with 2 fingers and turned it over in his hand. He looked at the date printed at the bottom. He had signed off on a maintenance request 11 days ago. He had been told it was being handled. He set the card on the edge of the front desk and looked at Raymond. "Has this elevator moved in 11 days?" Raymond said, "No, sir." Darnell Fontaine nodded once, slowly, then he looked toward Patricia Holt. "I need to speak with you," he said. "In your office." She said, "Of course." She said, "Absolutely." She said his name with a formality that had not been in her voice 20 minutes ago, and she led him toward the management office, and the lobby watched them go. Now, here is what most people did not know about what happened in that office. Patricia Holt had her files. She laid out the incident report, the one describing an unidentified male behaving in a manner that required documentation. She used words like protocol and due diligence and resident safety. She said she had acted in accordance with building policy. She said she would do the same again. Darnell Fontaine read the report the way he read contracts, without expression, without haste, from top to bottom. Then he set it down and looked at her. He said, "The resident whose safety you were protecting. That is my grandmother." Patricia Holt said she understood that now. He said, "The unidentified male in your report. He is the reason she made it down those stairs." She said she understood that as well. He said, "The elevator has been down for 11 days. My grandmother has a heart condition. She had a medical appointment she could not reschedule. She made it 11 flights before her knees gave out on the landing." He paused. "And a 17-year-old boy from the 4th floor carried her the rest of the way." He let that sit. Patricia Holt's hands were flat on the desk. Her voice, when she spoke, had lost its carrying quality. She said she had not known the full context. She said she had responded to what she observed. She said she was sorry if her actions had caused any distress. Darnell Fontaine looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I'd like you to pull Marcus Webb's file." She did. She found it. She set it on the desk. He read it in silence. Apartment 4C, Denise Webb, primary leaseholder, 1 dependent, Marcus Webb, minor. No violations, no complaints, no incidents of any kind. He closed the folder and set it back. He said, "I want the elevator repaired by end of business today. I want a contractor in this building within the hour, and I want you to write a formal letter on building letterhead to Marcus Webb and his mother. Not an apology on behalf of the building, an apology from you by name." Patricia Holt said she would do that. He stood. He picked up the incident report she had filed, folded it once, and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He said, "I'll be reviewing the management structure of this building. That review begins this week." He left the office. He did not slam the door. He did not need to. The lobby was quieter when he came back through it. His grandmother was still in the chair by the door, and he sat beside her for a while and they talked in low voices, and at one point she said something that made him close his eyes briefly and press his lips together. Raymond Okafor did not hear what she said, but he saw Darnell Fontaine's face, and he understood that whatever she had told him had settled something. After a time, Darnell Fontaine stood. He looked at Raymond Okafor. He said, 6 years at this desk." Raymond said, "Yes, sir." He said, You wrote down what you saw." Raymond said he had. Darnell Fontaine nodded. "I appreciate that." He said it the way a man says something he means precisely and does not need to expand upon. Then he walked to the stairwell door. He opened it. He looked up. 4 flights to 4C. He climbed them. The door to apartment 4C had a small scratch near the knob, the kind of mark left by a key found in the dark 100 times over by someone coming home from an early shift. The hallway smelled of old carpet and the warmth of a building lived in for a long time by people who cooked real food. Darnell Fontaine stood in front of that door for a moment, and then he knocked. Marcus Webb answered. He was in his school clothes now, a clean shirt, dark jeans, a backpack over one shoulder, ready to leave. He looked at the man in the doorway the way a 17-year-old looks at an unfamiliar adult, carefully, without alarm, taking the measure of him. Darnell Fontaine said, "You're Marcus." Marcus said, "Yes." He said, "Cecilia Fontaine is my grandmother." Marcus said nothing. He waited. Darnell Fontaine said, "She told me what you did this morning. All of it. The groceries, the stairs." He paused. "She wanted me to thank you in person." Marcus looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "She didn't need to do that." 5 words. Quiet, without performance, without the self-consciousness of a boy who wanted credit. Just 5 words that meant exactly what they said and nothing more. Darnell Fontaine studied him. There was something in the way Marcus Webb stood, hands visible, shoulders easy, backpack strap held loosely, that reminded him of something he could not immediately name. The quality of a person who did not need the room to acknowledge them. Someone who had been taught, a long time ago, that the work was the thing and the recognition was not. He said, "You have school." Marcus said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Go, we'll talk more." And then, before Marcus turned, he said, "What's in the front pocket of that backpack?" It was not a demand. It was the question of a man who had noticed the particular way Marcus held the strap. Carefully, with a slight inward angle, the way people carry things they do not want damaged. Marcus looked at him. Then he unzipped the front pocket, took out the folded letter, and held it out. Darnell Fontaine unfolded it. He read it. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted. The particular shift of a man who has just seen something confirm what he already believed. He refolded the letter and handed it back. He said, "State University, Summer Engineering Program. 12 students from across the region." Marcus said, "Yes, sir." Darnell Fontaine said, "Don't be late for school." Marcus went. He did not look back. He went down the stairs with his backpack and his letter and his grandmother's voice somewhere in the back of his mind, patient and certain, and he walked out through the lobby of the Alderton Arms into the morning, and the marble floor held the sound of his footsteps, and then released them. He did not know what had been set in motion behind him. He would not know for several days. The elevator was repaired by 4 o'clock that afternoon. Not by the usual contractor, the one who had been promising a visit for 11 days, but by a crew that arrived at noon in a van with a different company's name on the side, working without stopping and without the unhurried quality of people who know they are not being watched. They were being watched. Raymond Okafor watched from the desk with the expression of a man who had spent 6 years waiting for something to move and was now watching it move. By the time Denise Webb came home from her shift at 3:15, the elevator was running. She stood in front of it for a moment. This woman, who had navigated 12 flights for 11 days without complaint, who came home every evening with the smell of industrial detergent in her clothes and the weariness of someone on her feet since before dawn. And she pressed the button, and the doors opened, and she rode up to the 4th floor in silence. She did not know yet about the morning. Marcus had not called her at work. He would tell her at dinner, the way he told her things, carefully, in order, leaving nothing out. When he did, she set down her fork. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, "You carried her." He said yes. She said, "All the way down." He said yes. She looked at her son across the table. This boy she had built her life around, this boy who had his great-grandmother's stillness and his own particular kind of strength. And she did not say anything else for a while. She did not need to. What she did not know yet was that a letter had arrived that afternoon, slipped under the door of apartment 4C while she was still at work. It was on building letterhead, signed by Patricia Holt. It named Marcus Webb by name, used the word apologize 4 times, and described what he had done in language that left no room for interpretation. Denise Webb found it when she cleared the table after dinner, and she read it standing at the counter, and she read it twice. She folded it. She put it in the drawer where she kept important things. That was the first letter. It was not the last one. 3 days later, a second letter arrived. This one was from the office of Meridian Property Partners, on heavier paper with a different letterhead. It was addressed to Marcus Webb specifically, not to the apartment, not to his mother, but to him, by name. It informed him that the Meridian Property Partners Foundation offered an annual scholarship to students demonstrating academic excellence and community commitment. It informed him that the scholarship covered full tuition, room and board at a 4-year university of the recipient's choice. It informed him that he had been identified as this year's recipient. It was signed by Darnell Fontaine. Below the signature, in handwriting rather than print, were 4 words. The work speaks for itself. Marcus Webb read those words standing in the hallway of apartment 4C with his backpack still on his shoulder and his school clothes still carrying the day's particular smell of chalk, dust, and cafeteria air. He read them once. He read them again. He folded the letter and put it in the front pocket of his backpack next to the other one, and he stood in the quiet of the hallway for a moment. His grandmother had told him when he was 6 years old and furious about something he could no longer remember, to stay low and build high and let the work speak for itself. He had never forgotten it. He had never needed to. The reckoning did not arrive with noise. It arrived the way most real things arrive, in documents and decisions, in the quiet transfer of consequence from one set of hands to another. The review of the Alderton Arms management structure began on a Thursday morning, 6 days after Marcus Webb had carried Cecilia Fontaine down the last flight and a half of stairs and stood with his hands visible in a marble lobby while a woman with a laminated filing system decided what she saw. 2 people from Meridian's operations division arrived with laptops and a printed checklist and asked Raymond Okafor questions in a way that made clear they already knew most of the answers and were simply building the record. They sat at the small table near the mailboxes. They were there for 4 hours. Raymond Okafor told them everything. He told it in order. The 11 days, the maintenance contractor called and rescheduled and called again, the small white card with its yellowed corners, Mrs. Fontaine on the landing, Marcus Webb's hands and the careful steps down. He told them about the incident report Patricia Holt had filed and the language she had used and the way she had reached for her phone before she had asked a single question. He had kept his copy. He produced it from the inside pocket of his jacket, the same pocket, and set it on the table between them, and the two people from the operations division looked at it and then looked at each other. Raymond Okafor had worked that desk for 6 years. He had kept his expression neutral through incidents he had witnessed and a dozen mornings that left a particular residue in the back of his mind. He had said nothing. He had written things down. He was not the kind of man who made noise, but he was the kind of man who kept records. Patricia Holt was placed on administrative leave that same afternoon. The notice was delivered formally in her office with the door closed. She sat behind her desk with her color-coded cabinet and her laminated systems and her 11 years of documented certainty, and she heard the words, administrative leave, and then, pending full review of management conduct and building maintenance oversight, and then we will be in touch. And the woman from the operations division left, and Patricia Holt sat alone in her office for a long time. The review took 3 weeks. At the end of those 3 weeks, Patricia Holt's employment with Meridian Property Partners was terminated. The termination letter cited 3 things: failure to address the elevator repair within a reasonable time frame despite documented maintenance requests, an incident report that mischaracterized a resident's conduct and failed to reflect the full facts as witnessed by building staff, and a pattern of conduct toward residents inconsistent with the company's stated standards of professional management. It did not use the word bias. It did not need to. The pattern was in the files. Her color-coded, laminated, carefully documented files, and the pattern spoke for itself. She did not contest it. There was nothing to contest. The Alderton Arms hired a new property manager 6 weeks later. His name was David Park, and he had a reputation for the kind of competence that does not require anyone to be afraid of it. He introduced himself to every resident personally, floor by floor in the first week. He knocked on the door of apartment 4C on a Tuesday evening and introduced himself to Denise Webb, still in her work clothes, and told her that if there was ever a maintenance issue, she should call the desk directly and it would be addressed within 48 hours. She said she appreciated that. He said it was the job. Raymond Okafor was not moved to a different desk. What he was given 3 months after the review concluded was a letter from the Meridian Property Partners Foundation informing him that the company offered annual professional development grants to long-term building staff demonstrating exceptional commitment to resident welfare, and that he had been identified as this year's recipient. The grant covered the cost of the property management certification program he had been looking at for 2 years and had not been able to afford. He read the letter at the front desk on a quiet Tuesday morning, folded it, and put it in his jacket pocket. He said nothing about it to anyone for the rest of the day. But that evening, when the lobby was empty, and the elevator was running, and the marble floor held the particular quiet of a building settling into itself, Raymond Okafor sat at the desk and allowed himself, for just a moment, the expression of a man who had done the right thing and lived to see it matter. Marcus Webb finished the school year with a 3.9 grade point average. He attended the summer engineering program at the State University. 12 students from across the region. 12 weeks. A campus that smelled of cut grass and institutional coffee, and the electricity of people who had been given a room and told to build something. He did not talk about the Alderton Arms. He talked about load-bearing structures and material stress and the particular problem of designing something that had to hold weight it had not been designed for. He was, by any reasonable measure, the quietest student in the program. He was the one the instructors called on when the answer mattered. At the end then of the summer, the program director pulled him aside and told him that in 22 years she had seen perhaps 4 or 5 students with his particular quality of attention, the kind that does not announce itself, that simply sees what is there and works with it. She asked him what he wanted to build. He thought for a moment. He said he wasn't sure yet, but he thought it had something to do with the way things hold together when they're under pressure. She wrote that down. Now, let me tell you where Marcus Webb was on the morning the last piece of this settled into place. He was on a porch. Not the porch of the Alderton Arms. There was no porch at the Alderton Arms, only a marble lobby and a corner of Decatur and Ninth. He was on the porch of a 2-room house in rural Georgia, in the particular morning light that comes off that part of the country in late August, warm and slightly hazy, with the smell of turned earth and the sound of something moving in the garden that ran along the side of the house, larger than the house itself, the way it always had been. Estelle Webb was in the garden. She moved through it with the ease of someone who has done the same thing for so long that the motion has become a kind of thought. She was not hurrying. She did not hurry. She bent and straightened and bent again, and the garden received her attention the way it always had, without acknowledgement, without performance, simply growing. Marcus sat on the porch steps and watched her. He had his backpack beside him. In the front pocket, folded in thirds, were 2 letters, the acceptance and the scholarship, the way his grandmother had taught him to keep important things, close to the body, out of sight, ready when needed. He had not told Estelle about the morning in the lobby. He had not told her about Patricia Holt, or the marble floor, or the 7 or 8 people who had watched without moving. He had told her about Cecilia Fontaine. He had told her about the stairs. He had told her, in the careful way he told her things, about the 12 flights and the careful steps down and the hand steady at the back. Estelle Webb had listened without looking up from the garden. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You did right." 3 words, not a question, not a qualification. He said, "I know." She looked up at him, then, from the garden, with the expression she had worn since he was 6 years old. Not pride exactly, but something older than pride, something that had been there before he had done anything to earn it and would be there after. She pressed one dry hand against the earth and rose, and she walked to the porch steps and sat beside him, and for a long time neither of them said anything. The garden grew, the morning light moved. Somewhere in the distance a car passed on the road and the sound of it reached them and then faded. Estelle Webb said, "You stayin' low?" Marcus said yes. She said, "You buildin' high?" He said yes. She nodded once the way she nodded when something she already knew had been confirmed. Then she patted the back of his hand twice, the same gesture, the same 2 pats, and rose and went back into the garden. And Marcus Webb sat on the porch steps in the late August light with his backpack beside him and his 2 letters in the front pocket and the sound of his grandmother moving through the garden, and he did not need anything else. That is where I leave him. Not in the marble lobby, not in the boardroom or the management office or the summer program classroom. On the porch of a 2-room house in Georgia, in the morning, with the garden his grandmother kept and the voice she had given him and the particular kind of strength that does not announce itself and does not need to. Now, here is what I want you to sit with for a moment. Patricia Holt was not a villain from a story. She was a competent woman who had built 11 years of professional authority on assumptions she had never been asked to examine. She looked at a 17-year-old boy with his hands visible and his shoulders square, and she reached for the conclusion she had always reached. And she reached for it in a marble lobby in front of 8 witnesses, and she said it out loud. She was certain. She was wrong. And the certainty was the problem. Not the ignorance alone, but the certainty that made the question unnecessary. This happens every day. Not always in a marble lobby, not always with a property manager and a color-coded filing cabinet. Sometimes it is a parking lot. Sometimes it is a classroom. Sometimes it is a hospital corridor or a hotel lobby or a street corner where a man stands with his hands visible and his shoulders square, and someone decides, without asking, what they are seeing. And the people around them watch, and they do not speak, and the marble floor holds the sound and releases it, and the moment passes. But sometimes it does not pass. Sometimes there is a Raymond Okafor behind the desk, writing things down in small, careful letters, keeping the copy no one asked him to keep. Sometimes the quiet witness is the one who changes everything. Not with noise, not with confrontation, but with a folded piece of paper and the willingness to hand it to the right person at the right moment. And sometimes the boy in the gray hoodie is carrying something in the front pocket of his backpack that the room has no idea about. Not because he is hiding it. Because he was taught, a long time ago, that the work is the thing and the recognition is not. That the ones who make the most noise are the ones with the least to show. That you stay low, you build high, and when the time comes, the work speaks for itself. Marcus Webb did not set out to change the Alderton Arms. He set out to carry groceries up 12 flights of stairs for an old woman who could not do it herself. He set out to steady someone who needed steadying. That is all. The rest of it, the review, the termination, the new manager, the run-in elevator, the scholarship, none of it was his intention. It was his consequence. The consequence of a boy who had been taught that restraint is not weakness, that composure is not surrender, that dignity held under pressure is the most powerful thing a person can carry. He carried it all the way down, and the work spoke for itself. If you've ever held your composure when someone decided who you were before you said a word, drop a comment and tell me about it. I want to hear it. Every week on this channel, we find the people the world overlooked and we tell their stories. If that's the kind of story you want to keep watching, subscribe and share this one with someone who needs to hear it today.